Everybody, welcome back to the Blockbusters show. I'm Adam Sykes, and I have no funny intro for this video. It's another bad parody movie. Not really a shocker for Blockbusters show. Ricky won. Just roll the theme song. Finished watching the movie and I honestly don't even fucking know what to say anymore. Ricky 1 is a 1988 American comedy film that parodies the Rocky film series. It was written, edited, produced, and directed by William T. Nod. Many gags parody events in Rocky, but also reference other films such as The Godfather. We've looked at some bad parody movies on the Blockbusters show. We did Meet the Spartans, which was from the infamous Friedberg and Seltzer duo. The Comebacks, aka Sports Movie. We looked at Breaking Wind, which was from the equally shitty director Craig Moss. For one of the movie marathon videos that's on the second channel, last October I took a crack at Shriek, If You Know What I Did Last Friday the 13th, which was basically a knockoff of Scary Movie. This one's different. This one was made during the golden age of parody. This was before basically every movie was trying to be the poor man's scary movie. This was when everyone was trying to be like the next Airplane or Naked Gun or like Mel Brooks style movie. It's one of those. This is easily one of the most directionless parodies I've ever seen. And it's jarring because how do you fuck up a parody of a movie so beloved like Rocky? I mean, look at parody movies from back then from people like Mel Brooks or Zucker, Abram and Zucker back when they were on their peak. You got movies like Spaceballs, which was obviously Star Wars, and a couple of other movies thrown in. And then you got the first Hot Shots, which was supposed to be a take on Top Gun, and the second one was supposed to be a take on Rambo. All these movies had their own thing going on. It felt like they were creating their own little story that was obviously a take off of these popular movies. Not only did they, one, have fun with the source material, but two, they felt like they were both poking fun at it as well as kind of celebrating it. This is like a lot of shitty modern parody movies that came out in the 2000s and like early 2010s, which were basically just a bunch of, oh, look at that, it's that thing from that popular thing. Oh, look over there. It was like fucking the worst episode of Family Guy where it's just nonstop, look, it's this popular reference. Oh, celebrity. Oh, thing people are using. Movie, TV show that's relevant. This movie doesn't have that problem. Instead, this movie falls short of having any idea of what it's trying to do, which was surprising to me because the movie it's obviously a parody of is Rocky. Like I said about those really popular parody movies, they took things from the original that were iconic and they made goofy slants at them. Here, this movie has no fucking clue what it wants to do. That basically the whole like parody of Rocky is basically like the first minute and then like the last 20 minutes, and then in between is a bunch of fluff and filler that I don't even know how to describe. Overall gist of the movie is Ricky, who's obviously a take on Rocky, with a guy doing a really mediocre Sylvester Stallone impression, is in love with this girl who doesn't want him fighting too much because she's worried that he'll get himself hurt. Instead, her name is Angela versus Adrian from the original Rocky, and from there, it's just a bunch of different shenanigans and hijinks that really have nothing to do with Rocky. There's a scene very early on where they establish how Ricky and Angela met, and they do this through him being a male stripper, and she was at the club to study female reaction.
Angela only came to the club to do research for a class in female psychology. After the show, she asked me to help her with her research. That's how we met.
Honestly, this feels like a porno movie out of the 70s. This doesn't feel like a Zucker Brothers or Mel Brooks style parody movie. If anything, this movie feels like it's a prequel towards something like This Ain't Rocky, a XXX parody. Not only is it clear this movie went straight to video, you can barely make out what the fuck is happening on screen. It's that dark. Solo, a Star Wars story, is way more visible than anything in this movie. I don't know if that's just like the copy that I watched on YouTube. There are several different copies on YouTube, and every version I checked, they're just so terrible quality. You can barely make out anything that's happening in the film. Best thing is there's parts where they're trying to be funny with like goofy subtitles throughout the film for people that are not easy to understand or speaking some other language, and you can't even look at the subtitles. Like, it's that shitty. You can't even read subtitles on screen. There's a whole mafia subplot. Like, there's this black guy that's a wrestler, and he's obviously supposed to be a take on Apollo Creed. And again, instead of actually doing a play on Apollo Creed's name, instead they just call him the Champ. That's it. They don't give him some kind of Apollo Creed parody name. He's just the Champ. Ricky is an ex-member of the Mafia, or he got kicked out of the Mafia, or he was working with the Mafia, and now they're working with the Champ, the not Apollo Creed guy, and they set up a match between the two. I honestly don't know what any of the Mafia stuff had to do with this movie. All it does is it sets up for a really, really obvious joke parodying The Godfather. You know what's sad? That's one of the funnier parts of the movie. I honestly couldn't keep track of anything with the Mafia, because in one scene they'll say that Ricky is no longer working with them, but then in one scene he goes to the Mafia to get him a job because he needs money to help pay for medical bills because him and Angela are about to have a baby. And one thing they established early on is that the Mafia hooked him up with a job to be a male escort who walks around in a bunny costume.
Did you bring the carrots? Come in.
Again, what does any of this have to do with Rocky? It's like they just took the key things that people knew about Rocky, saved it for the first minute, and then the last 20 minutes, and they're like, I don't know, for the entire like middle section of it. I would say, oh, that's probably why we haven't had any kind of feature-length parody movies about Rocky. No, I think it's because people have the common sense to be like, oh, people remember this famous scene from Rocky or this famous scene, whether it's the training montage or the ending fights. And so they're like, oh, well, we'll just make parody sketches for stuff like SNL and Mad TV and stuff like that, and not make full movies out of things they clearly don't understand. Another thing that really doesn't connect to anything, there's a part where there's a scene at a department store with this guy who's trying to sell exploding doormats that keep out burglars.
Hey, where you going? Hey, come back here, you mealy-mouthed liberal creeps. I'll show you. You mealy-mouthed cowards.
Dude, I think even Macaulay Culkin would say are being a little excessive. And again, I have no clue how this connects to Rocky. I feel like they just wanted to do a bit with all this kind of stuff, and they just like, fuck it, put it in the movie. I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of really lame sex gags in this movie.
For only $100, you can buy a share in my rapidly expanding pornographic phone call business.
Shove it, you scummy asshole.
Would you like a job?
Asshole.
The movie's not really obnoxious with reference humor, but they make up for it with obnoxious sex gags that aren't clever in the slightest. There's lots of things where it's like, oh, there's a person with the name Officer Blowjob. And that's why I'm more than convinced that this movie was just the early stages of what was supposed to be a Rocky porn parody, but then they just nixed that halfway through. I also try to replicate Zucker Brothers or Mel Brooks style visual gags with people doing wacky things in the background, but it doesn't make sense half the time. Like, there's a part where they're in a hospital and someone's giving a speech, and then in the background there's a guy sucking off a blow-up doll. Like I said, the last 20 minutes of the movie is when they finally engage with anything that even resembles Rocky. They parody the training montage, and it's a bunch of lame jokes, like he's running backwards with his pants around his legs, and there's a part where he lifts heavy weights and falls through the floor, and it's stuff like that. There's this guy who's supposed to be Mickey, and the only thing that makes him look even remotely like the character of Mickey is that he wears a beanie. Like, they don't give this character Mickey's trademark raspy voice or his wise quips like, you're gonna eat lightning or you're gonna crap thunder. He does, like, none of that. Instead, what they do is they do a joke that he's, like, a pervert who used to flash kids in a public park.
Shut up.
When are you gonna visit us in the playground again?
I don't go to playgrounds.
Yes, you do. I'm Captain Raincoat, and I can say when you stop worrying, keep the witches away.
Throughout, I kept getting flashbacks to Meet the Spartans, and a little bit of Craig Moss near the end, But most of this movie, I was getting flashbacks to Meet the Spartans because it has that Seltzerburg appeal where it feels like it's made by people who didn't even see the original movies they're parodying. Instead, they watched the trailer and heard best of moments from friends who saw the movie and were like, oh, well, we can make a parody out of that. And then they turn around and watch movies like Airplane and Naked Gun. They're like, oh, well, we see all these like visual gags and people making goofy faces and pratfalls and slapstick. We can do that. But no, they didn't. They fucked it up. So then the fight happens, and it's just a slew of lame jokes. Like
bobbing and weaving, one narrow is bobbing, and the champ is weaving. Another right cross, another hook, another cross, and now... David, it's amazing to me that One Arrow's still out of sleep. I'll say this for One Arrow, he's all heart.
The point is, the movie ends with Ricky winning the fight. Him and Angela end up together, and if I had to compare it to another movie I reviewed for Blockbusters, I'd say it's just slightly better than Under the Rainbow. Because both of them have that like 80s comedy, screwball, wacky nature to them. But Under the Rainbow was just extremely offensive with how unfunny it was. This was more... I had no idea what they were going for. That's the entire vibe I got while watching this movie. Is that, you know, I've seen funnier parodies of Rocky, like in short comedy sketches, but as a full-length movie, from people who seem like they haven't even seen the actual film, it just doesn't work. Like shit, dude. I remember there was a parody of Rocky in the comebacks in one scene, and that, as unfunny as it was a better Rocky parody than this entire movie. The thing is, despite Rocky being considered one of the greatest movies ever made, and I agree, I think Rocky is a great movie, that doesn't stop it from being open to being parodied. Like the original Star Wars, that was a great movie, and it didn't stop Spaceballs from being funny. Top Gun, the Rambo movies, that didn't stop the Hot Shots movies from being funny. Most of the parody is just very scarce, and it's like the loosest sense of a parody of Rocky as it gets. Most of the jokes are either lazy sex gags or easy play on words or lame slapstick. In terms of worst parody movie, I honestly think that Craig Moss and Seltzerburg are slightly worse than this. This movie's bad, but I don't know. There's something about that non-stop reference humor and, oh, look at this current thing that was in Meet the Spartans and Breaking Wind that Seltzerburg and Craig Moss brought to those movies that was just slightly more aggravating. And Shriek If You Know What I Did last Friday the 13th was bad, but I could at least kind of see what they were trying to do. They didn't do it right, but I could at least see what they were trying to do. This movie feels like there's like no direction whatsoever. If you can imagine the people that made this, they probably had like half a sheet of paper that listed off things from Rocky that they could parody, and then they were like, shit, we have to flesh this out into a, I don't know, hour and a half, maybe slightly longer movie. And yeah, what we got was this straight-to-video crap. In a way, I guess you can say it kind of was like the Breaking Wind of its time, because it's obviously parodying something that the directors didn't really have enough interest to actually want to parody. So they were just like, oh, well, who really cares? Like with that one, they were just like, oh, well, even though it says it's a parody of Breaking Dawn, we're just going to parody the third movie because that one leads into Breaking Dawn. What I'm going to say is this. There are funny parody movies out there, and this is not one of them. Tune in next time to the Blockbuster Show. We have one more video for this month. It's going to be a movie marathon, but instead of YouTuber movies like I did a while ago, instead it's going to be starring Vine personalities. In other words, people who basically moved over from Vine to like Instagram or YouTube. It's going to be movies with those kind of people in it. A lot of it is from the shithead company Awesomeness TV, which you probably see on either YouTube or Netflix. They make a lot of crap there. So yeah, it's going to be an episode on that. Until then, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Champ's the greatest.
Well, beat him, and you're gonna be the greatest.
I can't beat the champ.
Why?
He's the champ.